Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine it's late at night. The house is completely quiet. You're sitting in your living room with your best friend.
Right, just totally relaxed.
Exactly. You know this person better than anyone. You know their laugh. You know their stories. You know exactly how they're going to react to a bad joke. You're comfortable. You're expecting the usual banter.
It's the comfort zone, that safe space where you can just be yourself.
Yeah. But then something happens. The air pressure in the room suddenly drops. It gets cold. And when your friend opens their mouth to speak, the voice that comes out just isn't theirs.
Oh, that's incredibly unsettling.
It really is.
Yeah.
It isn't even the voice of the person you thought was visiting. It's something, it's something older, colder, something that looks at you not as a human being with a name and a history, but as a collection of mathematical points on a grid, a set of what they call coordinates.
It sounds exactly like the opening scene of a psychological horror movie. Or a very tense sci-fi thriller.
It really does. But we aren't talking about fiction today. We are going right back to the source, to one of the most specific, jarring, and technically fascinating nights in the entire history of the Seth Material. We are looking at session 411.
The night, as we like to call it, that the boss showed up.
That's the best way to put it. Usually on this deep dive, we talk about Seth. For anyone who might need a quick refresher, Seth is the energy personality essence channeled by the author Jane Roberts. He's the guy. He's witty, he's boisterous, he's incredibly distinct.
He's very human.
Yeah. He's feel like a person you'd want to have a beer with, even if he doesn't have a physical body.
He has a very clear user interface, so to speak.
Right.
He's designed to be interacted with. He understands human social cues perfectly.
But today, we're looking at what happens when that interface crashes, or rather, when it's deliberately bypassed. What happens when the raw code underneath the personality breaks through? We are diving into the early sessions, Book 8, specifically Wednesday, May 15th, 1968.
And we really should note the time here. The session starts at exactly 9:11 p.m.
9:11 p.m. And the vibe is immediately, well, it's just different. It's a rare glimpse into the machinery behind the magic.
Before we unlock that door, however, we need to handle some quick housekeeping. It is important to state clearly that this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Yes, absolutely. We are drawing heavily from the incredible archives published by the New Awareness Network. And listen, we are going to cover a lot of ground today. But if this conversation sparks your curiosity, and I guarantee it will, you really owe it to yourself to go to the source.
I couldn't agree more. We are giving you the map, but the books are the actual territory. You can find the books and support the preservation of this incredible material at sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Go get the books. They are the real deal. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's May 1968, Elmira, New York. Jane Roberts and her husband Rob are in their living room. They've been doing this for a few years now, so they are very used to the routine.
Right, it's just another Wednesday.
Exactly. Jane goes into a trance, her glasses come off, Seth appears, Rob takes notes in shorthand. It's almost totally domestic.
It is domestic. It's their standard Wednesday night routine. They probably had dinner, cleaned up, and sat down expecting the usual Seth class. But on this specific night, at 9:11 p.m., the routine just breaks.
Jane starts to speak, but it isn't Seth. And Rob, who is sitting there with his pen poised, immediately notices a physical anomaly.
It's in the voice. Rob's notes are incredibly specific here, which is why the early sessions are so valuable to study. He doesn't just transcribe the words, he transcribes the atmosphere of the room. He describes the voice as high, somewhat distant, and quite precise.
Distant is the word that really sticks with me. Seth is usually described as vital or booming or energetic. He fills the room. Distant implies a complete lack of connection. It implies you're hearing something from very, very far away. And there was a weird cadence issue too, right?
Yeah, a very strange cadence, yeah. Think about how we naturally speak English. We have a specific prosody. When we finish a statement, our pitch drops. It's an auditory signal that says, I am done, now it's your turn.
Right. I went to the store, drop. The weather is nice, drop.
Exactly. But this voice, it was ending sentences on an upbeat. Rob kept getting confused. He would pause writing, thinking Jane was mid-sentence, waiting for the rest of the thought. but she had actually finished.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it created this incredibly disjointed, stuttering rhythm to the whole interaction.
It sounds completely disorienting. It's like listening to someone or something that understands the vocabulary English but doesn't understand the music of it. It's like an AI that hasn't quite mastered the flow of human conversation yet.
Or someone that simply isn't bound by the physical mechanics of breathing and speaking in the way we are. This wasn't just Jane having a mood swing or trying out a new character. This signaled a fundamental shift in what they call coordinates.
Coordinates. Let's pause on that word because it comes up a lot in this session. When they say coordinates, they aren't talking about latitude and longitude, are they?
No, not at all. Think of it more like a radio frequency or a server address. The entity, and we'll call this voice the entity for clarity, although it claims to be the larger identity that Seth actually belongs to, explains this later. It says it had to manipulate certain coordinates just to be heard.
So Seth operates on a frequency that's close to ours.
Exactly. It's a short hop for Seth to talk to us. He's tuned to a station near our own. But for this entity, it's a long-distance call from a completely different galaxy. It basically has to jam the signal through by brute force. That's why the voice is high and strained. It's the sound of a very large program trying to run on a processor that isn't built for it.
And it admits this distance right away. The voice literally says, "Although you do not find me as warmly personal as the Seth with whom you have been acquainted, I am a personality."
It's defensive almost, or maybe just highly factual. It's establishing its boundaries right out of the gate. I'm not your friend, but I am here.
It feels like the difference between talking to a customer service rep who is trained to be empathetic, who asks how your day is going, and then getting escalated to the back-end engineer who just reads you the binary code and asks if you understand it.
That is surprisingly accurate. And that distinction between the empathetic rep and the back-end engineer is actually the core theme of this entire session. It really begs the question, why do we need the customer service rep? Why do we need Seth? Why can't we just get the raw data from the source?
Right. There's this assumption in spiritual circles, I think, that higher is always better. That if you can channel the source, you should skip the middleman. We always want the pure, unfiltered truth. But this entity has a very specific, almost harsh answer for that.
It really does. It basically says, if I gave it to you raw, you wouldn't understand a single word of it.
The exact quote from the session is, "Information is meaningless unless it is interpreted so that you can understand it."
This is a profound epistemological point. We tend to think of knowledge as an object, like a rock. I can hand you a rock, and now you have the rock. You possess the knowledge. But this entity is arguing that knowledge is an interaction. It must be experienced to be real. If you can't integrate it, you don't actually know it.
It uses this really great analogy about unscrambling.
Yes. The entity explains that without a personality like Seth to act as a buffer or a translator, the inspiration that comes through to a human would be hit or miss or highly distorted.
It says Seth unscrambles it for you and then serves it neatly on a supper platter. I just love that image. It's so domestic. Seth is the waiter bringing you the cooked meal. The entity is what? The raw ingredients exploding in the kitchen.
The entity is the nuclear fusion in the sun that grows the vegetables. If you tried to eat the sun, you'd burn up. You need the process of photosynthesis, then the harvesting, then the cooking, then the serving. Seth is the interface. He creates a persona that makes the data palatable.
And Rob, sitting there listening to this strange, high-pitched voice, has a realization. He remembers something from years ago. Before the sessions even started, Jane tried to write a theoretical book entirely on her own.
The Physical Universe as Idea Construction. A very catchy title.
Rolls right off the tongue. I'm sure it would have been a massive bestseller.
Oh, it's incredibly dense. But she couldn't finish it. It was confusing, it was abstract, it was chaotic. And the entity points out that that book was a perfect example of Jane receiving raw, unscrambled data.
So because she didn't have the Seth persona to filter it yet, the information was basically useless.
Undependable is the word used in the text. It shows that channeling, or any kind of deep creative inspiration, really isn't just about opening a floodgate. It's about having a mechanism to structure that flow. If you open the dam without a turbine, you just get a flood. If you put a turbine in, and that's Seth, you get electricity, you get power you can actually use.
So Seth isn't just a mask. He's a necessary tool.
He is a completely necessary structure for translation. The entity is pure energy and concept. Seth is the localized application of that concept. He takes the abstract math of the entity and turns it into a story we can follow.
Speaking of localize, the physical way Jane experiences this entity is really unsettling. We talked about the voice, but her internal experience is even weirder. It's honestly spookier.
The between worlds experience.
Yeah. So usually when Seth comes through, Jane feels like he's coming down to her, right?
Huh.
Like stepping into a warm coat. It feels close. It feels snug.
Correct. It's grounding. It feels like an overlay.
But with the entity, the directionality completely flipped. She describes it as going up. She says, I find him up there. She visualizes a pyramid or a cone. She has to climb up the cone, basically leaving her body behind, to meet this entity halfway.
The quote is, "It's just funny going in and going out. He waits and I find him up there." It implies a hierarchy, or at least a dimensional distance, that just doesn't exist with Seth. Seth is a neighbor. The entity is living in a penthouse on the very edge of the atmosphere.
It sounds absolutely exhausting for her.
It is. It requires her to extend her consciousness much further away from physical reality than she is used to. She's stretching her psychic muscles to the breaking point. She has to leave the comfort of the physical system just to make contact.
And there was this experiment mentioned from the previous session that really highlights how alien this entity is. Rob had asked a question. What is it like to be a personality that has never been physical?
That is an incredibly difficult question to answer in words because our entire vocabulary is physical. We talk about grasping ideas, seeing the truth, feeling emotions. It's all sensory. It's all based on having a body.
So the entity didn't use words. It gave Jane an experience instead.
And she didn't even realize it was the answer until much later. She told her ESP class that she felt she was suspended between worlds. It wasn't a visual, it was a state of being. She was essentially in a void.
Imagine that. You ask a simple question, and instead of a verbal answer, you just get thrown into a sensory deprivation tank for a second. You get unplugged from the matrix.
It reinforces the entity's main claim. Knowledge cannot simply be given, it must be experienced. To understand what it's like to not be physical, Jane had to be momentarily stripped of her physical grounding. She had to feel the total lack of gravity, the lack of time, the lack of things.
It's effective, I'll give it that.
Yeah.
But also pretty terrifying. It's like teaching someone to swim by throwing them in the middle of the ocean at midnight.
Well, this brings us to the real meat of the session, the entity's worldview. Or rather, its complete lack of a worldview. Because this is where the conversation goes from a weird ghost story to mind-bending philosophy.
This is the trippy section. Buckle up, everyone. The entity basically tells Rob, I can't see your world.
Your own world, from my perspective, does not exist in the way I am sure it exists for you. This is the core of the camouflage theory.
Define camouflage for us in this context. Because usually, camouflage means hiding something in the woods.
Right. In the Seth Material, physical objects, chairs, tables, bodies, trees, are all called camouflage. They are the physical disguises that energy wears, so we can interact with it. We all agree to see a certain frequency of energy as wood and another as flesh. It's a shared hallucination, in a way, or a shared mental construction.
So we look and see a table. The entity looks and sees what? A swirling vortex of atoms.
It sees the intent. It sees the psychic energy. It sees the emotional intensity that keeps those atoms together, but it looks right through the wood and the nails. It explicitly says, your camouflages are not clear to me. It knows what the table means to Rob, that it's a place to write, a solid object, but it doesn't see the table as an object. It sees the blueprint, not the building.
Which explains exactly why this entity is terrible at small talk or giving practical advice. It can't predict the future or give advice on mundane things because it literally can't see the pieces on the board.
Exactly. If you ask it, will I get the job? It looks at you and sees a massive field of probabilities and emotional states. It doesn't see a job or a paycheck or an office building. Those are all camouflages. It can't help you navigate a maze it can't even perceive.
And it struggles with time for the exact same reason. It says it cannot break time down into seconds.
This part is fascinating. It says it sees seemingly whole segments of your time field at a single glance.
So while we are living life frame by frame, worrying about what happens in the next minute, the entity is looking at the whole movie reel just spread out on the floor.
We're looking at a giant painting. We are walking along the canvas with a microscope, seeing one brush stroke after another. Oh, this is blue, now it's red, now it's dark. We think the darkness will last forever because that's all we see in that specific second. The entity is standing back 10 feet looking at the whole portrait. It sees exactly how the dark contributes to the light.
And that perspective, that incredibly zoomed out view, leads to what I think is the most provocative and honestly kind of chilling insight of the entire deep dive. The entity draws a direct parallel between how we experience time and how we experience ourselves.
This is the pivot point. This is where the philosophy gets deeply personal.
Okay, let's unpack this. We chop time into seconds. The entity says we also chop our identity into self-structures.
Yes. Think about how you define yourself day to day. You say, I am happy right now, or I was a different person 10 years ago, or I am a teacher, or I am a father. We slice our identity into little bite-sized pieces, temporally and functionally, so we can handle them. We differentiate.
We compartmentalize.
Extreme compartmentalization. We can't handle the whole truth of who we are all at once. The entity, however, sees the innate unities. It sees the whole their self. It doesn't see Rob at 9:00 p.m. and Rob at 9:05 p.m. It sees the entire gestalt of Rob.
And then it drops this line. From my viewpoint, you are far more alone than I.
That stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. You were far more alone than I.
Why? Why does it say that? It's supposed to be this cold, distant, non-physical thing floating in a cone above the house. We're down here with our families and friends and dogs. We go to parties. How are we the lonely ones?
Because of the slicing. Because of the camouflage. We perceive ourselves as totally separate from everything else. We create the illusion of isolation by defining ourselves by our physical boundaries. My skin ends here, yours begins there. My thoughts are inside my skull, yours are inside yours. We are locked in these little biological bone boxes.
And the entity?
The entity exists in a gestalt, a massively connected network of consciousness. It knows it is part of Seth. It knows it is connected to Jane. It knows it is connected to a million other points of consciousness. It is never alone because it doesn't have the illusion of separation. It feels the connection constantly. It is always part of the we.
So our intense preoccupation with the physical world, which we think is everything, is actually puzzling to the entity.
It calls it a small portion of our whole experience. It looks at us and sees us obsessed with this tiny, fragmented sliver of reality, the physical moment, and completely ignoring the vast ocean of connection that we are actually swimming in.
It's like watching someone sit in a crowded room full of people who love them, but they're wearing a blindfold and noise-canceling headphones, just crying about how there's no one else there.
That is a perfect analogy. And the entity is the one standing there saying, take off the headphones. We're all right here. You're doing this to yourself.
You are far more alone than I. That is really going to stick with me. It flips the script entirely. We usually think of spirits or ghosts or non-physical entities as these lonely, drifting wanderers. But it's saying we are the ones in solitary confinement.
And we built the cell ourselves out of our firm belief in time and space. We locked the door from the inside.
Okay, so the room is getting heavy. The voice is high and precise. Rob is probably sweating trying to keep up with the shorthand notes. The philosophy is getting incredibly existential. The entity has just told them they're pitifully lonely because they can't see the big picture. And then the mood just breaks.
The shift happens at 10:36 p.m.
Jane comes out of the high trance. She pauses. She probably takes a deep breath. And then, bam, the familiar voice is back. Seth returns.
The notes describe him as strong and immediate and vital. It must have been such a massive relief for Rob. The air pressure in the room probably normalized instantly. The chill lifted.
And Seth enters with a joke. He literally says, I am the loudest one.
He really knows how to work a room. He immediately acknowledges the shift. I am the one who looks in on you. It's such a sharp contrast. The entity was talking about coordinates and time fields and the nature of perception. Very abstract, very cold. Seth is like, hey guys, I'm back. Did you miss me? Let's have a laugh.
But he also explains what just happened. He doesn't dismiss the entity at all. He validates it. He says he and the entity are independent portions of the same personality.
He confirms that he isn't disappearing. He's acting as the bridge. And he gives this hilarious image. He says he will take him by the hand and lead him here.
I love that visual so much.
Yeah.
You've got Seth, this booming, cigar-smoking, wine-drinking personality, metaphorically speaking, of course, channeling Jane's habits, literally holding the hand of this glowing, abstract, mathematical entity and dragging it into the living room like, come on, say hello to the humans. They don't bite. Look at the table.
It humanizes the metaphysical process completely. It shows that Seth understands the difficulty. He knows the entity is just too much for us. It's too cold, too vast. So he volunteers to be the guide. He says, I will translate the experience for you. I will show him around.
And here is a clock. It ticks. Isn't that quaint?
Exactly. And here is a chair. You sit in it. You don't just float through it.
And Seth makes a specific point to say he's not taking a back seat. He says, I am not taking the background seat, you see. But we want Rupert, which is his name, for Jane to learn to extend.
It was a training exercise. That's the practical reason for all of this spooky stuff. Jane needed to stretch her psychic muscles. She needed to reach up the pyramid, not just wait for Seth to come down.
So it wasn't that Seth was gone, it was that Jane had to go further out to get the signal.
Exactly, expanding her bandwidth. She was operating on 5G for a few minutes instead of her usual LTE.
And once Seth clears the air, once he reassures them that he's still the loudest one, he leaves them to their domestic quiet, which is just such a Seth thing to say.
It really is. It grounds everything back in the reality of a normal Wednesday night in Elmira. Okay, class is dismissed. Go have a snack. Go to bed. Don't worry about the void.
So we've gone from a creepy, high-pitched voice to a profound lesson on how we slice up time and identity to a reassuring visit from an old friend.
It's a perfect microcosm of the Seth material. It balances the high strangeness, the really sci-fi metaphysical stuff, with very practical, warm reassurance. It pushes you to the edge of what you can possibly understand, then pulls you back and says, it's okay, you're doing fine.
What's the big takeaway for you here? We've covered a lot of ground today.
For me, it's the supper platter idea, the validation of personality. We often try to strip away our humanity in search of ultimate truth, thinking we need to be cold and totally objective. But this session argues that our humanity, our ability to interpret, to feel, to tell stories, is actually the only way we can understand the truth. We need the filter. The filter isn't a flaw, it's a feature.
That is crucial. We aren't failing because we need stories. Stories are how we eat the sun without burning up.
Beautifully put.
For me, though, it's the concept of aloneness being a matter of coordinates. The idea that this entity, which seems so cold to us, actually views us with a kind of pity because we can't feel our own connections. It challenges the very way I define myself.
It strongly suggests that if we could just change our focus, shift our coordinates just a little bit, we would realize we are part of a much larger, much more connected web of consciousness.
We are just seconds trying to understand the hour.
Precisely. And we are terrified of the next second because we think it's completely separate from us. But the entity sees the whole hour and knows it's all one continuous thing.
Well, if you want to expand your own coordinates, you know exactly where to go. Check out the New Awareness Network.
And please, buy the books. Visit sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Don't just take our word for it, experience it, like the entity says. Read the raw text. Feel the unique rhythm of the sessions for yourself.
It's a trip totally worth taking.
And remember, even if you feel alone in your self-structure right now, looking at the bigger picture, you are part of something much, much larger.
What if the seconds we live in are just camouflages for our own larger entities? Something to think about while you make dinner tonight. A comforting thought to end on. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.